draft. It says draft of the rules. If you want to look at it on your phone right now, you could, okay? When we look at the draft, you'll see a disclaimer coming down through. The disclaimer will say, basically, this is where the council stopped. It also says that anything below that line is basically brainstorming, brain dumping, you pick the term you want to use. So one of the things when we first went through on the rules, and this is caused, trust me, if I would have known this a while ago, I would have probably not have allowed as much brain dumping as there was. Because people felt comfortable, right? They said, hey, throw that in there. We'll revisit it. It's just like negotiating a contract when you're buying something from somebody. You throw out an offer, they throw out an offer, right? You might have an idea. In a lot of ways, it's that back and forth. However, there's a lot of stuff below the line that people are going, well, it says right there, or they're reading into that sentence flows into that sentence. Also, I have a person from staff from our legislative affairs office who's also working with us, and she was going through and kind of cleaning it up a little bit just so that, you know, it made it a little easier to read for all of us. And there were a couple of shalls that got put in there, and they might have got put in the wrong spot. That's caused a little bit of, if you want to say, people go, hey, wait a minute, what are they trying to do there? As I said, we're working our way down the document. Even when we work our way down through the document, it doesn't mean that we won't come back and revisit the document. Is everybody good on that? There also, you'll find out, and we've had this happen in work sessions, we could be down in Fire Instructor 4 and go, ooh, wait a minute, we didn't address that back in Fire Instructor 1. You see where I'm going? When we may have to double back up. Or we might say, hey, wait a minute, so-and-so has to have that training within a time period, but there's no way for them to get that if we allow this time period in this other phase. That's where we had to go back and kind of play a little bit of catch up. Okay. So one of the things that you'll notice, we pretty much had made it all the way down through all of the classifications last week. We actually had gotten into the discipline. Folks, I didn't go asking for, hey, the fire marshal says there has to be more discipline. It speaks to it in Public Act 291. It speaks to the fact that somebody's certificate can be revoked or suspended. It speaks to it in there that if you're a convicted felon, your certificate can be revoked or it can be suspended. It speaks to in there if you make a wrongful statement or willfully wrong statement. Okay? I'll give you an example of a willfully wrong statement. You taught a class in 4 hours, it was supposed to be 16 hours. You passed out 2 rosters. Here's the Saturday roster, we're leaving at noon, but here's the Saturday roster and here's the Sunday roster. And you sign that on the bottom that says, I attest that I taught all the hours and the curriculum and everything. Okay, so there's different ways. Also, you could actually make a statement about somebody and it could be found false. So willfully wrong statement are a couple of things that are in there. So then it talks about, well, if you're going to have a process where you're going to take something away from somebody, there has to be a process on how they appeal, right? So one of the things that you'll see in there we're working through is that that person will come before the training council. The investigation would be done at the Bureau of Fire Services. Ultimately, the fire marshal would render a decision. If I'm going to suspend, let's say I suspend somebody's instructor certification for 2 years. In the process, it also talks about, I should speak in there, after 2 years, you have to take fire instructor 1. I'm making this up as we go, but just to give you an example, it's very clear. And you say, wait a minute, no, I don't agree with that. Then you can put in for an appeal, okay? You put in for appeal, you come back before the training council, then that person gets an opportunity in front of the training council. They also have the opportunity at that point to go into a closed session. So this doesn't all get played out in a training council meeting. The person has the ability to say, I want to go to closed session. They'll go into closed session, they'll get a chance to present their side. The fire marshal's office will present their side. And then the council will make a decision whether to uphold it, to toss it, or to modify it, okay? So those are some of the things that we're working through. The other part that we haven't quite gotten to, if you're following along in the rules we're getting down to, it talks about in the Public Act about a county trained chairperson. You know what? We've got fantastic people who are doing great things as a county training chairperson. And you start looking at some of the size of some of the counties in here and the amount of money and they're brokering on classes, there's a lot of responsibility with that and keeping all the paperwork up and everything else, right? But we also will say this, and I've heard this since the day I became the fire marshal, there are people in counties that are running it as a kingdom. And one of the things that will come out of this, it speaks to it in the rules even, is that it will be a vote. Okay? So, give you an example, if there's 22 departments in Livingston County, 22 votes get cast for who gets to be the county training chairperson. Okay? It also speaks to it in of how you remove somebody also, and it also speaks to having this election. Now, realistically, can you have all 22 departments voting on, let's say, what class you're gonna do in May? Probably not. But the idea is to establish a chair, and then if you wanna say, yeah, we'll establish a chair, and then we'll have a, I don't know, a vice president or vice chair, we'll have a treasurer, we'll have a secretary, something like that, and or you appoint somebody to take care of that. But that is, I'll share this, there's a lot of folks that are out there that are going, hey, this is a good thing, because down the road, they're gonna have some say in who gets to be that county training chairperson. But it's going to be a majority votes of that county. As the Bureau of Fire Services, we give the money to the designated person in that county. I also wanna make that very clear. When we give the money on October 1st to the counties, we give that money to them. What we really do is we give you this much credit. You redeem it by getting classes. So if we give you $17,500 that every county gets, then you say, hey, we're gonna run this class, and it starts taking off. It also has to be encumbered, and this is by law. It has to be encumbered by December 31st. Okay? Any money that is not encumbered comes back to the training council. That's very clear in the Public Act. Okay? And that's the money that you saw given out back when we did the grant process in February. And I think there will always be some money that will come back. I wish that it wasn't, but I think there will always be some money that will come back, and then it will be distributed in a process that the training council deems to do that. Okay? So when you're coming down through the document, if you're looking at it, first part of it is really, hey, here's a lot of definitions. You have to have that. You have to clarify. And that's been really good to have Liz from our Legislative Affairs Office on there, because she'll say, hey, I don't know what an AHJ is. Oh, okay, authority manager. Okay. I don't know what this is. So it's been good to have her there to work down through that. The classifications were set in the Act. Okay? There's a classification for firefighter, there's a classification for fire officer, there's a classification for fire instructor, there's a classification for public safety director, there's a classification for fire chief, there's a classification for fire inspector, there's a classification for fire investigator, there's a classification for a hazmat responder, there's a classification for a tech rescue responder. And there's one more that I am not. Airport, thank you very much. And there's one more, that's an ARP. Okay? So when you start looking at some of those, I'll give you an example. There's one for plan reviewer, or plans reviewer. Although in the NFPA standard it says plan, there's no S, and then reviewer. And one of the things is from what I understand, that was kind of one that was proposed, but it probably should have gotten taken out. But sometimes you don't catch that and it gets ratified, or it gets voted in, then it's in there. Okay? For some of the stuff that's outside of, give you an example, the fire inspector's credits. So if you've been currently a fire inspector, you're not gonna see a lot of changes in that, okay? And in fact, that process has been well established. You take your fire inspector 1 class through the NFPA, you pass that, you come back, you turn it into our office, we go down through, you have to have 60 credits in 3 years, that part isn't gonna change. Okay, we're not messing with that. The council said, hey, we're not, that program works, leave it alone, okay? But it is addressed under Public Act 291, and don't be surprised that you'll start to see your classes and stuff will start showing up in your smoke profile. Why? We kind of need to bring it all under one roof, and I think some of you will like that. Is the idea that you'll be able to go in there and you'll actually see your certification in there, realizing that's a certification that lasts for 3 years, it all expires on the same date. So.
Question on that one, you said you've already addressed that, it works in our time. Was there any discussion about being able to change your renewal date to coincide with all of your, your plans and your inspector at the same time?
No. And here's the other part. Your plans and your inspector are really tied to the NFPA. The only thing that's tied back to our office is Fire Inspector 1. that's also a fee that you're paying to them.
Yeah.
And so that would be one of the things of,
That's not covered.
no, it's not, no, but what I'm saying is your renewal with them.
Right.
So I guess the thing is, if you were to, in order for you to stay as an inspector two and a plan reviewer, you have to be in good standing with them.
Yes.
You're not in good standing with our office.
Right.
You're
Well,
fired.
days on the same day, then you can discuss it with an FDA.
Yeah,
Which, okay.
yeah. I'll ask.
Well, yeah,
That's one thing. I'm also on the IFMA board, the International Fire Marshals Association, and I'll be there in December for that meeting. And that's the type of stuff that the chapter should be asking about. Hey, what are you doing? It'd be interesting to see what other states do. So that's the good thing about being on that board. There's folks from other states and we can see. Yeah.
Is that, fire inspector one showing up in smoke dependent on?
It's not showing up in smoke at all.
Oh, no, I know, but
Yeah.
is that the intent long term?
Yes.
Okay, is that?
But our intent would be is that your fire inspector would show up in your training profile just like anything else you have.
Yeah, cause that's frustrating as a chief, now I can't go in and check my inspectors anywhere,
Yeah.
and it's mad.
You have to call Rhonda to see if they're in good standing, right? Yeah, eventually, we wanna migrate that in so that it goes in there. It'll be a certain, what may be a problem, I'm almost 99% sure it's going to be a problem, is we probably are gonna be able to track your individual credits on your renewal of smoke. Because what happens at a conference, Chief Pless comes for 1 day and he gets 8 credits. Chief Miller comes for 2 days and he gets 16 credits. Captain Seal comes for 2.5 days, but he leaves at noon, so he got 20 of the 24 credits, right? I'm just saying he had to get going. And so you can't really go in there and you just say, hey, here's 24 credits, because everybody would get it. So that's part of the tracking system back through the Inspector Society. And we're also not gonna be, we're not going to track the Livingston County Fire Marshals Association brings somebody in from Viking to talk about sprinkler systems and it's worth 2 credits. So there's still, you're still gonna have to maintain that and make sure you're on rosters. But realize that those rosters all end up back at the Bureau. But I really think it's going to be tough to bring that over because you're not drawing a course number and it's not for a set time. Okay? So this is probably a good time to segue into this too. The training that you do at your fire station, the training that you do as part of your department is not going to be tracked in smoke. Okay? However, if you say, if North Oakland says, hey, we wanna host a incident safety officer class, and Tim draws a number, then that's going to be, that of course will be in there, right? But if Tim says, hey, it's raining tonight, we're not gonna go out and cut a car, we're gonna do some hands-on RIT packaging and moving in the apparatus bay, that's his choice, he makes the call. So the individual departments are gonna maintain the training records for the folks. This has been a big thing that I'm getting a lot of questions on. They're like, and this rumor's out there, and I really wanna make this very clear to everyone. This is not going to work like EMS in the sense that you have to have a trauma credit, you have to have a MACBORD credit. Everybody good on that? It is going to be based on a 3-year cycle like an EMS license. Why? Because you, the fire service, told us that's what you want and the council listened. With that being said though, the needs of the department in Hartland might be different than the needs in Fenton. Might be different than the needs in Howell. Remember, you're the authority having jurisdiction, and also remember in MIOSHA Part 74, under number 3, duties of the employer, training commensurate with the duties that you're expected to perform. If you don't have a boat, you probably don't need to do boat training. If you have a dive team, you have to do dive team training. So I'm just giving you an example of, and it's not going to be, this is the rumor, boy, this was really running rampant here about a month ago. Well, you're gonna have to submit like EMS credits. No, you're not. Everybody clear on that? I'll say it again. No, you're not. The other thing that you are not going to have to do, you are not going to have a state certified fire instructor teaching your in-house training all the time. If you're fortunate enough to have someone in your roster, fantastic. But it is not, I'll state it as in a big not, N-O-T, capital letters, it is not gonna be a requirement to have a state certified instructor. to do in-house training to meet the continuing ed requirements. However, if you're going to teach a class that's drawn with a council number, right? 2Z-2020, right? If we're gonna do that, it is going to be a state certified instructor. Can that training, could North Oakland say, hey, we're gonna run all of our officers through incident safety officers some weekend? And would that meet the requirements probably for the next 3 years for the continuing education? Absolutely. Could they say, hey, we're gonna send them to the Southeast Chiefs Expo Day, and they get 8 hours of training there, and does that count? Absolutely. So what I'm trying to impress upon you is that actually you will have opportunities. You wanna do your continuing ed in-house, you wanna do your continuing ed someplace else, it's allowable. It's not gonna be controlled by the Bureau of Fire
You
Services.
just continue that for like your neighboring departments and hospitals.
Sure.
on the bus.
Just make sure you have a roster, and make sure that all the names make it onto the roster, because that's what MIOSHA wants to see. Okay, if MIOSHA comes in to audit you, they're gonna say, hey, I wanna see Rob's training records, Mr. Ginter, we pull the file, he goes down, they go down through and they look at whether his name shows up on the roster or not. Okay? So, this is the big one that's out there, I wanna make it very clear, for all of you out in the Facebook Live world, I wanna make this very clear, I joke about that, but this has been an issue. I've spent a lot of hours with this one. In-house training for continuing ed done at your fire department level, not teaching a class that's adopted curriculum through the Firefighter Training Council. So we're doing SCBAs with our brand new Drager air packs. That's in-house training. You pick who is the instructor. Okay? If you as the authority having jurisdiction want to set criteria who can and can't do certain things, that's up to you.
So you have to have a roster and.
You have to have the roster, who the instructor was, the amount of time.
A description of what.
Description, yep, that's what MIOSHA is looking for. They're looking for who was the instructor, who was there, print sign, when did it start, when did it end? Just, many of you in this room, and I've said that even when I've been in some of the remote parts of the state, you're already doing this. However, there are some folks that are really wound up, and I think what they're wound up about is the fact that they believe that, no, it's gonna be like the state EMS where you have to be certified, and you have to put your stuff in 6 weeks in advance, and you can't change the class. Folks, you can change the class, like I said, it's raining, we're not gonna cut a car today. Tonight would be a miserable night to be outside. Then bring them inside. Do your training. Okay?
Document what it was.
Document what it was. Okay?
Is there a set list of classes or criteria that are required?
Yes.
Part 7.
Not classes, okay? There's gonna be a set number of hours. And it looks like the hour's going to be 12 hours per year per person, which many of you are already doing this. And I also share this, you're right, Ed, you say that's easy, it is, but some places they aren't doing any training right now, so that's one of the things. But for most of the places, you're right. And that's one of the things that last week I was up at the MTA event in Frankenmuth, and I was talking with folks, and I said, hey, how many of you, your fire departments are doing 3 hours a month? And most of the hands went up. You're not gonna have anything to worry about. You're already doing it. What I also appealed though to, and I'm hearing this from the fire service, well, wait a minute. Once somebody finds out that we don't have to do all that, we could see our training budgets get cut and a whole host of other things. Listen, we're trying to meet the minimum requirements. If you, as the authority having jurisdiction, say it's 6 hours a month, that's your business. But the idea here is there will be a minimum number of hours of training. It'll be 12 hours per year, and that's for everyone on the roster. Okay? Now, if you are a company officer, so you hold a company officer certification, you're gonna need 12 hours every 3 years. That's 4 hours a year. So let me ask you this. If you go to the Southeast Chiefs Conference for a day and a half and sit through those classes, you see how you're renewed for the next 3 years? If you are a fire chief, and we're not gonna make you do both, just if Chief Plus has company officer and he's a chief officer, he's gonna do 12 hours also. So it's not algebra, 12 plus 12, it's 12. However, if Chief Plus is a fire instructor, he's going to do 12 hours over 3 years also. So if he goes to one of the instructors conferences, guess what? Not every year, if he went once every 3 years, he would be good. If he's teaching at the academy and his name's showing up on rosters, guess what? He's good. Okay? So one of the things is that this is not, I don't think, gonna be as hard to achieve as some people think that it is. In fact, it's pretty straightforward, it's out there, you know, and the idea here though is you're maintaining the training records back to your organization. So what if you do go to FDIC? Well, then I would print off the certificate and I would make sure it makes it back into your training record. Chief, I went to FDIC, thanks for sending me, here's my sheet, and it should go in their file. Everybody good on that? So that's one of the things that, you know, we're not gonna have folks sending in their certificate from FDIC and saying, hey, TJ, can you put this in my smoke profile? We just don't have the staff to do that. Okay? So if you're already using some way that you're tracking, your training back in your own department, please continue to do that, okay? But it's not, you're not going to be sending anything in to us. The same thing with renewing, you're not gonna have to, there's gonna be a paperwork exchange. There's not gonna be a fee to renew. That was the other rumor that was out there. This wouldn't be attainable because there would be a fee. I've had people tell me in some of these, of course there'll be a fee, and I'm like, there's no fee, okay? It doesn't even speak to fees in the law. Remember, we said we can't be more stringent than the law.
So is it going to be like EMS though, where you attest to your credits that you have?
Yes.
You can be audited and.
Yes.
So that's the only time you ever have
Yep.
exchange of
Yes.
the actual credits
What I-
by individual, right? By individual.
By individual.
Do we have to log in to do that every 2 years? or-
Chances are, this is what we're looking at, if you're an instructor in the room, raise your hand. So what are we all gonna do probably in the next 30 days? on
Already
smoke?
did it.
It's already there?
Dude, yesterday.
All right, it hit yesterday, good. Hey, I tell you what, I do have the best staff, I kid you not, for the lack of staff that we have, for the stuff that we get done, I'm glad to hear it's there. So if you're an instructor, you need to log into Smoke, a little box is gonna pop up. And it says, I attest that I'm going to follow the rules, basically in the IGAN, right? Hey, Kevin Sehlmeyer logs in, I attest I've done the continuing education. Now, what happens if my OSHA comes in for some other reason that they do an audit and find out that, Jake, you're right with me saying you didn't meet your training requirements, for an example? Won't put too much
Gotta
pressure
watch
on
him,
you.
I'll tell you.
So let's say that he did click on the box. He says, I attested I did, and they come in and do an audit, and they find out that he didn't. It isn't going to be a Hartland, Deerfield Fire Department's in trouble. It's going to be as an individual, you didn't have the credits. And I think what you're gonna find in most places, if we're saying 12 hours per year, most of you are doing more than that in a year. Who gets to pick the topic? You do. Who's the authority having jurisdiction? The fire department that you work for. Can I have my neighbors over and do some live fire training? Absolutely, make sure that you get their name on a roster, or maybe tell them bring your own roster, right? And I'll sign it at the end, but
So with
there
Smoke,
are
though,
ways.
if you don't log in and do the MOU,
Yep.
you lose your status.
If you don't log into Smoke as an instructor in about 90 days, I will tell Dan Hammerberg for the 3rd straight year, turn you off.
Yes.
Now, when I turn, hear this, when I turn Chief Miller off, at that point, then he's gotta send me a letter that says, hey, I've been busy, I didn't go into Smoke, can you turn me back on? Basically, I want something in writing just acknowledging that you wanna be turned back on. Because here's one of the things we're also doing. Our database is getting cleaner and cleaner every year. Why? Hey, if somebody didn't check their MOU for the last 2 years, I bet they're not teaching anymore. So, you know, sometimes we get asked questions, how many fire instructors do we have in the state? When I got this job back in April of 2017, if I was to ask TJ or Dan, they'd go, a bunch. Today, based on the MOUs, I can tell you how many people clicked that box last year. I can also share with you that if it's turned off for Chief Miller, and he sends me a note, I send that over to Dan, and Dan, that box will pop right up and he's back in. Everybody good on that? But the idea is that we want the instructors visiting Smoke on a regular basis. If anything, we're asking you to do it once a year. And most likely, that will be an easy thing to do with the continuing ed. So we'll make it very clear in the rules, it talks about a 3-year cycle, we'll establish what that date is, and then we'll go 3 years out from that, and then after that, it will be every 3 years.
So can the training officer do that for his firefighter?
Going into the box?
For the verify that they've done their 12 hours of training for.
Well, they could, people could say, hey, before I go check this box, I wanna make sure, yes. But the individual's gonna have to log in.
So we're gonna.
Here's the other thing that's gonna happen by having the individual log in. We're gonna get your current phone number. We're gonna find out that you moved from your house to a condo. You see where I'm going with that? We're gonna find out that you switched fire departments. We're gonna find out that in some cases you're retired, that hey, Kevin Sehlmeyer didn't do his MOU. I wonder if he's even still on a department. So believe it or not, this process is gonna really help us clean up our database, because I would have to put a big asterisk in front of any data I give you today, especially if you were to ask me how many instructors we have. I think after 2 years, we've kind of got that funneled down to a pretty good number. I can tell you how many took the firefighter 2 exam last year and passed. I can tell you how many took the firefighter 1 and passed. I can tell you how many people challenged last year, okay? I can tell you how many people retested last year, because we're starting to break that data out on the way that we do rosters and stuff, and the training coordinators come up. We eventually want to get to the point where we have an idea of what people are doing. And the other reason why we want you to visit your smoke profile, like I said, is as I'm finding out and trying to reach out to different people, hey, folks are saying, hey, I haven't used that AOL account in a long time, or I don't have that Hotmail account, or I don't have that. So, the idea is please periodically go in there and clean up. And you have to have a primary phone number in your profile. Okay, it doesn't want to let you out of there. The other thing that I want to hit on, and this is just, we're doing a town hall, I know we're talking about rules, but if somebody comes to you from another department, please do not go in and create another record. So if Tim came to work for me at my department, what I don't want to do is go in there and create another account for Tim. And the system will allow you to do it.
But that gets difficult based on whoever did the data entry,
Right.
because sometimes you gotta find everybody by driver's license
Yes.
number.
And
Sometimes
whether
you
they
put the
use-
dashes in or
or
didn't
they
put
use-
the
yes.
dashes in.
So if you get to that point and you're still struggling, you call TJ or Dan.
Yeah.
You really do. And we actually, if you haven't been on our website, it's starting to look a whole lot different. We actually have tutorial videos, and it talks about how do I add a member? How do I transfer a member in? So we actually have literally you could take your phone and have this thing telling you what keystrokes you should be making at the time that you're doing it. Okay? But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It literally comes, and you think that everybody would use a capital letter for, like S, and then it would be my driver's license number. That didn't happen in the past. So there's also a lot of times the chief added somebody, hey, I gotta get them in there because Ginter won't take them in fire school unless they're on the roster. So I put the bare minimum in there. I get their driver's license number. I don't know their address, so I don't put any of that in. I get their phone number when I text them, right? You get just enough. The problem is down the road, how do we keep in touch with that person? Does that make sense?
What is what's the thought on, so if a member leaves a department and they're off for how many years?
You should end date them.
No, I did, but I'm
Okay.
saying for their certification, so.
We gotta talk about that. Council, we gotta talk about it. I think one of the things that, and I would ask, I'd be welcome to input tonight. Do you think that if somebody, let's say I left for 3 years, I don't know, I joined the Peace Corps and I moved somewhere to build a village. And I was gone for 4 years and I came back and I said, man, I really miss being in the fire service, I wanna get back on my local fire department. Should I have to go through some type of refresher thing, being gone for 3 years?
What do we put in the law?
Doesn't really speak to it. It says the fire marshal will develop processes.
Well, what
With
happens?
with the approval of the.
What
The
happens?
continuing ed is it says continuing ed process. I don't
What
think
happens
there
after
is.
3 years if they don't attest to their credit? What happens?
Well, if they don't attest to their credits, then either they didn't meet the continuing ed or they didn't go in
Right,
and
I'm
log
saying,
in.
they left the department, what happens at that point?
Well,
They get,
you should have end dated them.
well, yeah, we
Yeah.
will.
So if they're end dated, they're out there. They're in limbo. Let's say.
So that's what I'm saying, does their certification then expire?
No, it's
They haven't-
end dated, but you're always in the system. We never go in and say, You know, so-and-so, I mean, the whole idea of our database is if you've been a firefighter in the state of Michigan, you're gonna stay in that database. However, you could be end dated as in you left the department.
So, but if they don't attest, what happens?
If they don't attest, it
If they don't
basically.
renew,
Right, it's basically gonna come down to, I'm sure we're gonna be able to run a report, and this is one of the things where I really don't have the staff right now. Maybe in 3 years it'll be different, we can hope, right? But what I'm sharing is that we might come back and say, hey, chief, there's 3 people on the Fenton City Fire Department that they didn't renew. And you might say, well, all 3 of them are gone.
but would the thought be to lock them out of smoke at that point, so another department?
I don't know that smoke, well, you gotta transfer, there's a process you have to go through to pick them up.
I'm just saying, if somebody leaves the department, they leave my department, they go to
Yes.
your department in 5 years, if they've never renewed, there's gotta be something in there to say,
Well, it's gonna be end dated, and that's one of the things is then we're gonna look at it and we're gonna say, hey, Chief Miller, you wanna bring Seal on, he's been gone for 5 years. He's gonna have to then go probably back through some refresher.
What are you looking for, what's the cost of reentry?
I don't think there's a cost to
I don't
re-enter.
mean physical cost, or monetary cost, some,
yeah, there's gotta be something.
Well,
some
well,
minimum
if everybody's been doing 12, it's 36 credits, right? I mean, to get back in, you have to be current.
But I guess that's right, cause I don't know about the rest of you, but we get a lot of people with applications now, they left for, they transferred out, they've been gone for 5 or 6 years, they want to get back in.
Yep.
What's going to be the?
Well, we haven't, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's why I'm out here, and I think that what I've heard from folks that have, but I don't wanna taint what you're thinking, so I'll go there in a minute, but.
I thought we discussed 5 years. I'm just trying to.
So it's 5 years, you think?
I thought.
So you could be gone 5 years and come back?
I thought that's what we discussed.
With no refresher or makeup?
I think that's what I'm trying to find it. I'm looking.
I think we're gonna, but you're requiring everybody who stayed to do continuing ed, how can you let somebody back in the
No.
game and not?
I'm just saying.
I guess that's what I'll do, if you have an expiration date.
Expiring.
Right. So you're saying that after 5 years of being gone, that certificate would be. Yeah.
EMS license, you just don't lose it. If you're an EMT,
We may have got lost in
for years, you're done. There is
Yeah,
no refresher
yeah,
to come
well,
back.
you have that grace period to come back,
Well.
but it isn't
after
very
that
long.
grace period,
Yeah, no, you're right, you start
done,
over.
You know, because things have changed in that time period, so there should be some sort of refresher.
Well, let me ask you this, does anybody in here have a process that if somebody's gone for, let's say somebody's off for a year, do you have a process that they have to go through to get back on?
They go back to their probation.
They go back through the probation? I see,
Yeah.
Jake, you wanna answer kind of what?
So for us, if they were gone for anywhere short even as a month, I mean, you gotta get caught up with all the trainings that we've done,
Okay.
show the basic, JPR review, and then go through agility course, where we can get back on full duty.
Right.
Yeah, we do the same thing. After 30 days, their station officer has to identify what skills they have to go through.
But what if you have a new hire comes in, he's been off the department for 4 years?
Then they
Yeah,
have,
they're
they
going,
have to come back
to,
on.
academy.
You make him go back to the
Yeah, we won't take them on.
What's your minimum, is there a minimum?
I can't say that we've addressed that, but,
Just-
yeah.
They're the authority having jurisdiction, and that works for their program.
No,
If you were to say, hey, I think you need to make up 36 hours of training, I'm just throwing out a number, because it is getting harder to get folks, right? And, you know, that's one of the things too, is I hear this from a lot of folks. You know, I was really involved in the fire department, and then my kids came along. And then my kids started, I wanted to coach them, and I wanted to do this. But then they got to be 14 years old, and they didn't so much wanna hang around with me as much, right? And so you see people re-engage and come back in, and I don't think we wanna have a process where we say you can't, but we definitely have to visit what is the process. The department I came from, you're off 180 days for any reason. You could take a leave of absence, you broke your leg and you didn't get back within 180 days, you had to go back through and it was a checklist and you had to perform all this training. Yeah. So, I'm not saying that's the right way that worked for our organization. I think that's the part of the authority having jurisdiction. But I'll also say this, I think we're gonna have to address the continuing ed part. Is, wait a minute, Tim says, hey, I've been here doing my part, and chief disappears for 3 years, and he comes back and he just says, well, I'm back on. Well, wait a minute, what is that process? So, we're gonna have that discussion, okay, I promise you that. Because that is getting asked more and more of how do we get back on. And I guess if somebody says, hey, I was gone for 5, probably at a minimum, we'd make them do 3 years worth, right? We'd make them do the 36 hours. I don't know, that's stuff we're gonna have to work out.
I'll look at it because I remember having that discussion we had at the table, it might be in one of the drafts and they got taken back out.
Well, and that's one of the issues is, there's a lot of stuff that was talked at the table, but it was actually in the law that went.
Right, but some of it didn't get in
Yeah.
the final, so I'll look and see,
Yeah.
at least give a reference.
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
Discussion for, I think it was 5 years, and then you had to do the fire one, so.
So you're saying at 5 years, you gotta go back through it?
That's what we originally
Do it again.
discussed, and I don't, it never made it in law.
Okay.
That's what the coalition was, and we're definitely changing it.
Yeah. Well, there was some changes even as it was going through the process, right? Yeah. So, any,
But like I said.
and just to share this is probably another rumor that's out there. Well, when Kevin Sehlmeyer was drafting 291, it was nowhere near that table, was it? And what I'm getting at is that the law, on the 3rd day I was on the job, Frank Waters, who was our legislative affairs guy, says, hey, come on, we're going to the fire service is gonna push, 291's going, you gotta go to the hearing. And, that was, you know, I'm not, that's about time, you know, it was out there, people were looking at it, but.
We worked on it at least 5 years.
Yeah, so it wasn't something that, you know, I've heard that, well, I'm pushing my agenda. Well, guess what? That law was already, that train was already down the tracks. And also, you can't really have an agenda when you have to follow the script, can you? Just,
You guys,
what's that?
you guys.
Okay.
No, I wanna correct that this year.
That was a, internal joke between me and him.
No, but I wanna correct that because that's out there. The fire inspector sat at the table, the investigator sat at the table, the chief sat at the table, the union sat at the table, the Michigan State Firemen's Association sat at the table, we all sat at that table. Every group that was represented was at that table at every single meeting. So
Everybody was represented.
everybody was, and the union didn't have any bigger word than.
They had one vote just like.
They had one vote just like everybody else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you, don't spread that around.
Well, I think-
sat at that table for 5 years, and that pisses me off when you hear people say that, and I'm sorry. I'm
And,
not attacking
but
you,
I'll
I'm
also
just
say this,
all that room.
thank you for saying that, because you come to all the rest of these town meetings.
I'll give you more.
You know, no, I mean, I said, that's where a lot of these rumors get started, and it's like, it's, you know, that's the other thing, you know, this group in here, I'm amongst a lot of friends and folks that I've known for a while, right? But there's times I go to a town hall meeting where I don't know a whole lot of folks, and so they're trying to figure out, how many of you know how many people are on the training council? The number's 9, by the way. But who do they represent?
And are you communicating with them?
Help me out on that. Who's on the council? Who's
Michigan
representing?
Fire
the council?
Service Instructors Association.
The fire instructors.
IFFS,
Hey, whoa.
MMLL.
I gotta put my instructor hat on. Thanks for coming out and giving me an answer.
You said
One answer.
how many?
One.
Oh,
All right. So the instructors are on there. Who else is on there? The inspectors are on there. The township, right now, the representative is from the Michigan Municipal League, but they also represent the MTA, the Michigan Township Association, okay? They just go back and forth on who gets appointed. That's Greg Jack. Okay, Brian Bloomstra represents the instructors. Lene White represents the inspectors. I heard the chiefs, right? The chiefs actually have 2 folks on the council. You have Alan Stiles from over in Muskegon County, okay? And then the chair is appointed by the governor. The chair is Tackett from Texas Township down by Kalamazoo. And then you have Greg Janik, who represents the Michigan Municipal League, so there's 3 chiefs that are on the council. Eileen Pettinger represents who? She represents the union. Okay. Who else is on the council? The Michigan Fire, Terry Blackmere, who was the president last year, is on there representing the Michigan Firemen's Association. Who else?
Ex officio.
The fire marshal is on, right? No, it's not the UP. Well, the change to the law was that the fire marshal got to pick somebody. My pick was a guy out of Traverse City, Jake Strakens. And the reason I picked him is because I wanted to get somebody north of US 10. I also knew that he had a fairly good commitment from his chief and such that he could attend to come to the meetings, because that's the other thing, we need people to come to the meetings, right? And him and I discussed at great lengths before, and especially after he got the appointment, is, listen, you represent really the firefighters above US 10, okay? Including the whole UP. And I've gotta give a big shout out to Jake. He is taking that seriously. He's telling me, hey, I'm calling over here, I'm going to this association, I'm doing these different things. Now, could you call any of those folks? Could you call all of those folks? Sure you
Find
could.
out how to get hold of them.
Yeah, well, funny you bring that up. Now you're setting them up, I'm knocking them down tonight.
Yes.
All right. On the training council website now, where the draft rules are, there is a roster listing who is on the council, including most of them, it's their cell phone number and their email. So it's right on the page now. And we're re-engineering the page for the Bureau of Fire Services. Don't be surprised, there's gonna be someone say it's a folder, or for you IT folks in the room, I'll buck it. Where we're gonna have a copy of Public Act 291. We're gonna have this piece of paper. This is the J-card process. It's gonna have a copy of the draft rules. It's gonna have that roster with everybody on the training council. Okay? There is going to be a copy of my OSHA Part 74. And we're gonna put it all in one place so that when people wanna go back and they wanna look at the law, or they wanna look at my OSHA, or they wanna look at the draft, they'll be able to do that. Right now, we've got it all in one area under the Michigan Firefighter Training Council. So you gotta sort your way down through the documents. Here's the other thing you should know. Also on the Michigan Firefighter Training Council, below the line there, is the schedule for the meetings. So we want you to know when the training council meets, but also anytime we schedule a special meeting or a work session, the last one was on September 24th, that was listed as a special meeting. We follow the Open Meeting Act. Anytime we have a chance of having a quorum, which is most of the time when we work on the rules, you can come and be in the room.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Why can't those be in the place that's recorded and you can tell live?
The IT capabilities in a lot of ways.
I mean, like for the meeting thing, like I could put you in my boardroom in a heartbeat and get those things publicized throughout the state. And it would just make that easier, you know, possibility.
I think one of the things though is, I will say this, not to say that you're way out of the way, but a lot of, we've talked about where they wanna work, and the council for the most part wants to work in Lansing. You don't have to necessarily be in the state building, because we're over at Delta and we've been at college. But one of the things is that, you know, they're looking at technology and stuff. Just remember this though, that when you're appointed to a board or a committee, you're expected to come to the meetings and be in there. Because the other part is people are saying, well, why don't you just all sit at home and you all back and forth and, you know, give your opinion. The idea is that, I think if you've been there to watch, and a few of you have been lately, there's times where we might go back and forth for a half an hour on a topic, just to kind of, hey, what are the instructors got a problem with that? The inspectors got a problem with that? What do the chiefs think about that? So there is some back and forth, and I'll say this, we get the most work done when we're in a room together.
It's hard to get when you're video conferencing
Yeah,
or
it is.
I'm just saying,
teleconferencing.
if you could video your meetings, so that those that couldn't drive to the event, so.
Yeah.
But
Something to look at. Like I said,
Facebook Live them.
What's that?
Facebook Live them.
Yeah, well, probably what we're doing tonight, right? So, absolutely.
Did you guys issue the credits to the counties yet?
The money has not been moved over yet. One of the reasons why the money hasn't been over, we needed to make sure that we had a budget. We do have a budget, and so we'll transfer the money over to the counties. But there was nothing, you can't transfer something that isn't there, but the money will make it over into the budget. Also, there's a formula that the money is dispersed on, so every county's gonna get $17,500, that doesn't change. And then based on square miles and population, the rest of the money gets divvied up. The most amount of money goes to Wayne County, followed by Oakland County, followed by Macomb County. Kenton, Macomb might be pretty close, but that's how it breaks on out, going all the way out. There's 26 counties that receive more than the 17.5. Okay, and it's based on, some of the counties in the UP actually fall into that formula, because if you take like the Escanaba area, which has a pretty good population base, and then you take Marquette, and you take Sault Ste. Marie, and then you take Marquette County, which is the biggest county in the state, and it add in the total number of square miles, and they get extra points for that, if that makes sense. so they get some extra money there, okay? This year, council approved at the August meeting that $50,000 out of the 25, or 2,500,000, 50,000 would be earmarked for train-the-trainers for 10 new courses that are coming from the National Fire Academy. And it was specially earmarked for train-the-trainer would be done in Region 2, which is basically south of M46, and then there would be a train-the-trainer to the north, okay? The train-the-trainers will move around some. The whole idea of the train-the-trainer is that we need to get a pool of people that can teach these classes. If you're currently a fire instructor 1, if you take the class, you can teach the class, right? So one of the things that we'll be looking for also for the train-the-trainers is we're gonna have 30 per class, we're trying to get 60 people with the idea that if they each went out and did a class in the first 6 months, you see where there's more instructors in there, we can roll that out and get it a little bigger. So that's still in effect for instructor 1, where if you take the class, you can teach it. So the days of, you remember we had a train-the-trainer, there was only 60 people, and there were only 60 that could do it in the state. We're gonna stick with the system we have, but we've gotta get, we gotta get the pump primed, so to speak. So that money was set aside to do that. If there's any of that left, that also would come back after the encumberment. Although that training, most likely, we're seeing probably the best time to do those will probably be January, February, into early March. We missed the holidays, we missed the hunting seasons, we missed a lot of the heavy school stuff outside, right, in the fall. So, in the conference, well, you mean doing it at the conference?
Mhm.
The conference is pretty much all set.
I noticed that was one of the things, to speak to the Fire Officer 3 program no longer, October 1st, no longer exists,
So the NFA, who controls the curriculum, took leadership 1, 2, and 3, and health and safety officer down. It's not available for us to teach out loud anymore, okay? Which then council voted at the last meeting that because it's not supported, and the NFA, talking with them, they wanted me to take it down, okay? We took that down. We did approve 10 classes. Some believe there are 3 classes that they have different names, but they kind of build off of what leadership 1, 2, and 3 used to do, okay? And there is a new standalone health and safety officer class. The old days, if you took these 4 classes, you were a fire officer 3, those are done. Fire officer 1, fire officer 2, fire officer 3, fire officer 4 will be, you'll go to a class, you'll take the class, you'll have some assignments that you have to do based on the JPRs in those. If you complete the assignments and you complete the course, you're eligible to take the tests, and there will be an exam for all of those. Okay? Now, before any of you ask, everybody's paper in this room is good. Everybody good on that? If you're currently a fire officer 1, 2, and 3, a lot of us, right? We're still that. And you will be that as long as you are involved in the fire service. Okay? However, let's say that we have somebody let's say Terry's got fire officer 1, 2, and 3. And he says, I'd like to take fire officer 4. I've been looking for something to do. I think I want to take that. If he's an instructor 1, because now the prereq to take fire officer 1, and it says in the NFPA standard, they have to be taken in order. And the first thing is you have to be an instructor 1. You are an instructor 1, right? Then he's going to enroll in the fire officer 4 class. He's going to go take the class. He's going to turn in the projects. I can tell you right now, for fire officer 4, it's not writing letters, it's building projects. Somebody at the fire officer 4 level should be able to prepare budgets. They should be able to develop a strategic plan. They should be able to develop an operational plan. Those things are outlined in the JPR. So it might be that the class there isn't a whole lot to the class itself, but the idea is during this time period you're in it, you have to finish these projects. When the projects are done, then he can take the test. If he scores a 70 or higher on that test, he will be a fire officer 4. Let's say that he doesn't pass the test, he writes a 69. He can retake that test. I don't know what word to use, challenge, he can retake that test. So if you fail the test, the fire officer 1, 2, 3, 4 have to be taken in order. Give you an example. He already had fire officer 1, 2, and 3. He's also a fire instructor 1. He could then enroll in that. Everybody We good on that?
If he's not a fire instructor one, he has
Then
to
he
take the
has to
class.
take it,
Instructor one and then take out.
and then he would take it, okay? Now, let me share this with you. If you currently do the way that we do fire officer, we call it company officer 1 and 2, and all those prereq classes, you probably have tied up in there somewhere about 140 to 160 hours. Now, you could say, yeah, but when I'm done, I'm a company officer 1 and 2. I'll give you that. Fire officer 1, fire instructor 1 is 40 hours. We believe that fire officer 1 is going to be right around 40 hours. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't gonna be the homework and stuff you're gonna have to work on. The contact hours sitting in a classroom will be 40 hours or less. And we also believe that fire officer 2 will be less than 40 hours. So if you do the math there, to be an instructor 1, fire officer 1, fire officer 2, you're gonna have no more than 120 hours invested. It's going to be less hours in the future.
How about with where the pre-connects go? Is
Where's
it still
the what?
gonna be all these random pre-connects?
The other classes, the incident safety officer, the, ed math probably goes away only because that's a home built program and it just goes away. It'll be fire instructor 1, 2, and 3, okay? What will happen, will MITCO, PITCO, SITCO, those will be available if a county wants to host those and use it for kind of an employee development, those courses will be supported. Any of the classes that are NFA classes that NFA currently supports on their dashboard, they're available for state delivery. That's why we picked up these 10 classes. But none of those classes, I wanna make this very clear, none of the classes, if you wanna say the stamp collecting we've done in the past, you take this class, take this, no, you take this class, this class, this class, this class, turn it in, and then you get a fire officer series certificate, which means or company officer 1 and 2 certificate series. We're not gonna have that. You're gonna go to class, you're gonna have a textbook, you're gonna go to class, you're gonna do hands-on stuff that's related to JPRs. It's coming straight out of the NFPA standard, and then you're going to take an exam. You pass the exam with a 70%, you will be. So really, for the first time, if you really think about it, in the state of Michigan, you will be a certified fire officer. I'll say it again, everybody's paper that's out there is still good. There's nobody making you go to the next level.
So you're saying, for a new hire fire officer, new process fire officer?
Yep.
They have a fire instructor 1
Yes.
prior to take.
Yes.
That's driven by.
And they have to be a firefighter 2.
Fire 1, 2.
They have to be a 2, and they have to be an instructor 1 before they can take the fire officer 1.
And that's driven by NFPA requirement?
Yes.
Who can teach fire instructor 1?
The folks who have been the fire instructors in the past. But I will say this, when we go to roll this new curriculum out, all of the instructors are gonna have to go through an in-service to get brought up to, this is the book we're gonna use, this is gonna, yeah. And I can assure you that the fire officer 1, 2, 3, and 4, it won't be longer than 8 hours
For the in-service.
for the in-service.
So I
Just wanna make sure everybody's on the same page, but I also wanna make this very clear. The days of, reading slides to folks, they're over. And it's going to be a facilitated type style of learning. That's what the NFA is rolling out. These trainers you're gonna go to, the slides have gone, they're cut all the way down. It's you do this activity, you do this activity, you do this activity. So the training, and that's what students are saying they want. So one of the things that we're going to look at is the folks that have already been teaching the classes, that are already the instructor 1s and the instructor 2s, is they're gonna have to be brought up to speed though. And there's no way that we can, to just throw out a book and say, do this. And the other part is, the activities that meet the JPRs, they're not optional. So if you say, well, I bet you can write a letter, you don't have to write a letter. And I bet you can count, you don't have to do that. Hey, I bet you can investigate an accident, you don't need to do that. Hey, I bet you can deliver a press briefing. Hey, I bet you can do this. Those are type things, and a lot of them are gonna get done in class, and they're gonna get done with role-playing and different things. But some of them are, you're gonna have to produce a memo. And one of the things that we're gonna look at is it has to take on the form of a memo. It would be no different, I gotta believe, that if I was gonna put out a memo, the chief would say, probably, hey, chief wants to take a look at it. And if it doesn't pass, and it says, hey, what's that style, right? Or, hey, here's that letter you asked to give to Commissioner so-and-so, and you're like, oh, that doesn't even look like a modern business type letter. So that's one of the things, we start talking about fire officer 1 stuff, it's, There's an issue in the community and you write a letter. There's an issue in the fire station, you write a letter. There is an accident that occurs and you investigate it. Not only do you investigate it, you find out what the root cause was, and then you write a policy to fix it. Pretty elementary, basic stuff, right? And that's one of the things, when you look at those JPRs, is those JPRs build off of, these are things that would make it a whole lot easier for you all to be out there doing the job. So,
I haven't paid attention. What are we doing with the RAF Pro Board Certified Officer 1, 2, and 3s? Are those gonna, because the JPRs meet the Pro Board certification? Are those gonna come over and
we have not, that is one thing that council has left to the very end, is to figure out reciprocity within the
Reciprocity
state.
stuff, the Pro Board stuff?
So, you know, I'm not gonna speak for the rest of the council.
Okay. So
Most
you
of the
have-
stuff that we've talked about tonight is stuff that council's thoroughly talked about it.
So we haven't got that far yet, that's all I'm asking.
No,
Okay.
we haven't got that far yet.
So I would just like to make clear, so currently, as of today, there is no company or fire officer free program that can be put on until the new curriculum is approved and the rules, or just the new curriculum?
The rules.
You can't do 1 and 2.
You can do 1 and 2.
Yeah, those are still.
The rules are still in effect,
Okay.
but the 3 that's in the rules doesn't exist.
Right, that's what.
Those 4
I
classes
just
don't
wanted to make
exist.
sure
They
so
don't
no-
exist.
So,
This isn't anything that I dreamed up, they don't exist. And I'll say this, they haven't been supported for a while, and we let everybody finish. We said, council said until September 30th it had to be done. So any classes that were already in the books, but once we found out it wasn't supported by the NFA, we quit even allowing classes, that was about July.
What's the timeline, and I mean, not to hold you to anything, are we a year, 18 months?
Well, I was hoping that I would be standing here today and I would be probably talking more about what the curriculum is. I really did, I thought it was. I think one of the things when you start looking through the draft, you know, we doodle polled, or we looked at doodle polling, it's Fire Prevention Week next week. Folks, it's hard for people to be away, right? And I've got some obligations even to the state fire marshal to be out and do different things, right? So realistically, we meet on the 22nd, on a Tuesday. We moved the meeting off of Fire Prevention Week and we moved it back so people could be home. That was a request from council members. And so we'll meet on the 22nd, we'll meet in the morning, we'll get a work session, we'll get maybe 3 hours in. I think we'll get farther down to being close to the end of the document. Holly's going to put out a doodle poll to the council members to see if we can't get something in, get a work day in before deer season. I know deer season started yesterday, I'm talking about the fire season, okay? So, we're gonna try to get another work session in, but the reality is then you start bumping up against the holidays. The problem with it is, it's a good problem to have, because we go to the instructors conference in December. Okay, they moved that, it's the first weekend in December, but that isn't really a day that council can work with everything that's going on at a conference, right? So we're gonna have to get some days in between there. So realistically, even if we could get it done by Christmas, I would be hopeful, but I'm not sure.
And you gotta have 15
And then-
legislative days. to-
And that, well, but it's
Plus
still gotta
the
work its way
hearings.
through.
Plus the hearings, yeah, so
Yeah,
you're
yeah. Yep.
May,
But one of the, yeah,
March?
realistically,
March to May somewhere?
yeah, probably. And you gotta get the session days in too,
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's tough.
So one of the things, I know that's frustrating, folks, I know we had said, hey, this is the line in the sand. The fire officer 3 classes though, that were under the old system, they are not supported by the NFA any longer, they've been taken down. Okay?
1 and 2 are still good
You
though.
could still do 1 and 2. I would- I
Some
would-
guys that are like halfway through a
Yeah.
series, they can tie it off.
You know,
and
this is
then
the other thing that I've had some folks share with me, well, we'll start another batch. Well, if you start another batch, our intention is that once the rules go into effect, and we're writing it in, once the rules are in effect, we're going to the new system. Okay? We're moving forward.
And at that point, you won't be able to continue the current.
Maybe not. We've been telling the fire service, the council has, since January of 18, when that law went into effect, actually it was signed in November of 17, it went into effect on the 31st. We've been telling folks that yesterday was the new day. We thought we had the rules done, we thought that was the day. So, anybody who's saying, I didn't know, the word's been clearly out there. This is what we're going to do. Now, with that also being said, the current rules are still in effect. And if you had somebody that says, hey, I really need an ed map to finish mine up, and there's a company officer class in Ann Arbor, and I really need that, those can be run. But the fire officer 3 is an issue because we don't have had them done though, when they go to turn in all their stuff.
Right.
You gotta have your 1 and 2, yeah. So, but there will be no more of those classes.
No, I'm not talking
And
about.
don't let anybody talk you into, well, wait a minute, the replacement is this class and this class and this class. That's not true. The law, the rules clearly say leadership 1, 2, and 3. Those classes aren't 1, 2, and 3 anymore. Okay? So that's one of the things that, and there is no health and safety officer. They've actually changed the name of that course. And those courses are, those 3 courses that we think are important for employee development, council, they did approve those classes and they're 3 of the 10.
If we have to have a trainer for those now under FA.
We're gonna have a train the trainer to try to get a pool, however, I know that one of the groups is bringing in one of those classes. So if you were to go through that class, you could teach that class. It's been approved by council. And if you take the class, you can teach the class. It's very clear to what it speaks to in the current law. Any other questions on rules? No, that's.
I don't wanna beat a dead horse as an instructor, but the instructor course, at least for the officer. Is there any requirement, once they get it, that they have to keep active as an instructor?
We've already addressed that in work sessions. Thank you very much. You and Tim been talking? I'm joking.
No, I'm joking.
You were setting up pretty doggone good, that's what I say.
Oh,
No, that's a
no.
perfect segue. So, we know that there are people that are gonna take fire officer 1, or excuse me, fire instructor 1 who have no intention of teaching. We agree on that? So, hey, I'm gonna take that class because it's the gatekeeper class to get me into what, I wanna be an officer, but I don't wanna teach. So, when they go through the instructor 1, they gotta pass it. The NFPA requirement says you gotta pass it. So they gotta pass the written test, which is going to 70% when the new rules are in effect. Every test will be 70%.
Hold on, make sure you restate that. When the new rules go
When the
into
new rules
effect,
go into
not
effect.
now.
So if somebody takes it now, it's easy. And if somebody was to fail it, could they wait until the new rules go in and take it? Absolutely they could. Okay? That part doesn't change. Right now it's 80, that's in the rules, okay? They're gonna have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is, I took it, I passed it, I stood up in front and presented and I passed. Congratulations, you've completed fire instructor 1. Okay? If you wanna be a fire instructor 1, then you're gonna go another route, you're gonna fill out a form that says, I wanna go on. And then you're gonna do the 16 hours of mentoring that's required currently, and that will still be there, okay? And when your 16 hours are up, you send your sheet in, you mentor under somebody, then you'll be a state certified fire instructor 1 that can go out and teach classes, okay? We did talk about, it's in the rules if you're looking down through there, what about this person took the other road? I said, no, I just wanna be an officer. But you get over here on the officer side and you go, hey, I think I'd like to teach. Then at that point, you would still have your certificate that says you passed, you would make application and you would have to do the mentoring for 16 hours. And then you would be added in. Why is this important? Because if I choose the path of, I got the certificate, I only needed it to be in class, and I'm not gonna teach, I don't have to meet the continuing ed requirements for a fire instructor in the state of Michigan. If I go down this aisle though, and I do get the certificate that says I'm a fire instructor 1, certified, right? Then I'm gonna have to do the continuing ed, which looks like it's gonna be 12 hours over 3 years. Okay.
So you gotta do your firefighter training for 12 hours, you gotta do 12 hours of instructor, and you gotta do your 12 hours of whatever level of officer you are, so 36 hours in 3 years.
Yep.
Fair enough?
Yeah. So if you go to one instructors conference, you're good.
Yeah.
If you teach at the Howell High School class and you get more than 15 or 16 hours, you're good. You know, there's gonna be ways for people, we want people teaching. That was probably the biggest thing we've heard from folks. There are a lot of people out there that say they're a certified instructor that have never really stood in front of a class. Or they don't get involved. So, you know, this will help hopefully with, when we need proctors for tests and different things, and guys and gals will be saying, hey, Gary, I help out with Monroe County, I need to get some credits. Or, I'll see you in December at the instructors conference and I'll get my credits there too. Or, there's some classes that are approved as Q courses. There's a guy by the name of Jason Morin down in Jackson County. He's got a master, or he's got a master's in education. He teaches up at the instructor conference. He'll be up there this year again.
Rockstar.
He's got a great class. So if you said, hey, I'm gonna get 100 of my closest instructor friends in a room and hire him using fireworks money, have him come in for the day, you just got 8 hours towards renewing your instructor. I hope that you're seeing that we're trying to make this as easy as we can. Is it gonna require you to go do 12 hours somewhere? Absolutely. But we're not gonna get all hung up on, it has to be a PowerPoint credit, and it has to be this, or it has to be that. We're not going there, we're just saying you have to. Amen. Okay.
Chief, is there any, discussion about reciprocity for staff and command going over to fire officer four?
We haven't got to that part yet.
Or EFO,
Yeah. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
that's all that reciprocity stuff's got,
Yep.
the pro board, the EFO.
However, I can share this with you, because it's been very clear, and we got an opinion from the AG's office. If you're coming from another state and you have it, it says the fire marshal shall grant you reciprocity if you're in good standing in the state you come from, you're not a convicted felon, and when you sign that application, you aren't making a willfully, gotta can't go with the word now.
Materially false statement.
Yes, material false statement, thank you. So if that's the case, so if you wanna say this, if you're out there and you're looking at, hey, somebody stops by your station, hey, I was a firefighter in Virginia, my wife got transferred up here, I got a new job, I wanna get on your department, firefighter 1 and 2, we'll put them to work tomorrow. You have to bring them onto your roster, you have to enter them and put them on your roster, fill out the form. From the state of Virginia, we need a letter saying they were in good standing, because we don't wanna have somebody come from another state, maybe that's why they're moving, is because something happened, right? And then they turn that in, and we'll issue them their firefighter 1 and 2. After we get the rules done, we will square up then anybody who's got out-of-state certificates, or folks in the military, okay? So that's been something that we've struggled with in the past too. We've had folks that, you know, somebody's in the military for 20 years, they could retire as a deputy chief of Ramstein Air Force Base, they move back to Michigan, and their paper doesn't work. We'll put them to work, we'll give them their firefighter 1 and 2. Well, I'm all about putting people to work, okay? I want you, because it's hard enough to get people, right? So, we'll put people to work, we will square away, as soon as the rules are done though, we will square away the folks that are from out of state, who have certificates to turn in and show they're in good standing in those states, then we can issue those certificates. In fact, it says the fire marshal shall. One of the things that we kind of missed, it was the military, it says the fire marshal might, but this fire marshal's a veteran, so I can share it shall. All right? And I say that, I mean, that kind of bothers me a little bit. When I saw that, it says the fire marshal may grant reciprocity to somebody out of the military.
In the law?
It's in the law.
We put them in.
It's in there.
Really?
Yeah. And like I said, that was something that, as I look at that, I go, but here's the deal, it says for firefighter 1 and 2, I can't grant a reciprocity for fire officer training that they've done, which is IFSAC in the military. We will be able to though, right? We'll get there. So.
That was
But if you have somebody, I'll say this again, especially out there, folks who are listening in, if you have somebody that wants to come onto your department and you wanna put them to work, you gotta hire them, you gotta bring them in. And I get it, you could say conditioned on your paperwork passes the thing, but they gotta be on the roster. We only issue certificates to folks that are rostered on Michigan Fire Departments. Because otherwise, we could have everybody from around the country sending these certificates saying, hey, I wanna be a Michigan certified, boom, 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 boom. Okay? And we simply don't have the staff hours to do that.
There's a question going back to a comment that was made about, RAF being pro board accredited, and accepting their officer program, and your statement to that was that you hadn't gotten there yet. OCC is also pro board accredited now as well. But the pro board accreditation goes by several facts. One of them is that you meet the NFPA standard. So in order to meet the NFPA standard, you gotta meet the JPRs. Have both those accredited organizations been teaching above what the state program is to meet the JPRs?
I don't know that for a fact.
Yes.
Okay. So are you allowed to teach above the state program when a state puts out a certain program that a fire instructor 1 must follow?
So you say, hey, I wanna add in, 20 minutes of PowerPoint even though it's not in there, can you do that? Absolutely.
Okay.
But the classes minimally have to be. Here's the
It's
other
gotta
thing.
meet the
Dave.
JPR,
Here's the other
and
thing.
yeah.
Dave. Rob, how many hours for a firefighter 1 and 2 class at OCC right now? 400?
420.
Did you hear that? 420 hours. The schedule just came out last Friday for firefighter 1 and 2 is 248 hours. Their class more than exceeds.
Mm.
Okay?
It's a 11-week academy.
Yeah. And I think Lansing Community College has even gone higher than that. I think they're up over 500 hours in their academy. So can you add it to it? Now, I would also say this though, I think there might be a little bit of a beef with the students if you said, hey, I know the state says fire officer 1 is 40 hours, but I wanna add my own 10 extra hours. I don't think there's gonna be, but if people were in the class and they wanna sit through it, I guess that would, but we're gonna test them on the JPRs. And we're going to hold them to the task book of completing the assignments that are in there.
Right, but now that the state is going down with the new rule and meeting the requirements of the NFPA standard, should be relatively simple for any agency to get the pro board accreditation, because everything you're teaching is now meeting the standard, right? You just gotta meet a couple of the other.
It has to meet the
requirements.
current standard.
The current standard, and that's where we're headed to the state. Okay.
I think if you look at the certificates that are out there, though, it doesn't meet the current standard.
Yeah.
Which certificates? Which ones you talking about, don't meet the standard?
There's certificates that are out there that people are being tested to the previous standards. So when the standard changes, the test is based off of, we're testing people to the most current standard. Just like we redid our firefighter 1 and 2 class.
Right.
You can't say, well, we're gonna keep the old books and we're gonna teach firefighter 1 and 2 for a couple more years. The state has switched to the new version. So the same thing will happen in fire officers, same thing will happen in fire instructor. It says the most current, it actually says it in the law, it says the most current NFPA standard. So when the standard changes, the curriculum changes with it. Now, it could go the other way too, right? I mean, but typically those standards don't go backwards, they go the other way, per se, if you wanna say on requirements. But there could be something that's in this current standard that down the road, they say, yeah, we're taking that part out, well then.
But that would be the same thing though, Kevin, I would assume though, so if somebody presented you with a pro board certification that met the last standard before these rules go into effect, there should be reciprocity and give them their fire officer 3. Now, if they take a class after the new NFPA standards out and they take a class that's 2 standards old and they say, hey, I want this, no, that makes sense, but that's what you're saying, right?
That's what you're saying.
No, I'm asking, well, that's what you just said, is that if there's
No,
classes being taught, if
What I'm
there's classes
saying
being
is
taught
that
to an old
when we get to
standard.
the time that it's the cycle that we're in.
Right.
The curriculum, I'm required
Right.
by the law to use the current NFPA standard and minimally meet it, which means the minimum requirement. Those JPRs, they are not optional.
Correct.
The setting the class part, that isn't optional, right? So it has to meet the JPRs. I also can't go and say, hey, I'm gonna add in 5 other things that I think you should have. And if you really think about it, this where we have the classes, Midco, Pitco, Stidco, and all of those, we've actually required beyond, in some cases, what minimally met the NFPA standard. And I thought that was what a lot of folks on coalition made clear, that that's one thing we were trying to fix, is that it meets the NFPA standard.
Right, so I guess just so I'm clear, so we're gonna, a person A comes from West Virginia with a pro board certified fire officer 3.
And they're still currently certified in that state.
Still currently certified because they took the class 10 years ago and they got their fire officer 3. They come to Michigan, we hand them a certificate based on a 10-year-old standard.
With a letter from the state of wherever.
That they're in good standing.
Yep.
But we have somebody who's already here in the state of Michigan, takes a class, that took a class with a pro board certification last year,
Yeah.
and they bring that certificate and want it, we're not gonna give it to them?
The paper that people have, we've been working hard, the council
Okay.
has, to accept stuff. But I'll also say this, moving forward, right?
Any new classes?
If you go to a lot of places, just to give you an example, even at Oakland Community College, how many tests do they take, Rob? How many firefighter tests do they take?
Like in a week, or?
No, I'm saying, when
At the end of the
at the end of the course, you take the Michigan test.
Oh, yeah.
And then what other tests do you take?
It takes pro board time.
Pro board.
So
Yeah.
those students are taking 2 tests.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I think that we still need to work through, is some are saying, no, I took a test over here. If you go to any other state, I was talking to somebody today from Virginia, and they said, in Virginia, you have to pass the fire academy and take the tests. And then, a week later, I took the pro board test. Now, are they gonna present a certificate that says they're pro board? Absolutely they are. Okay? But the point is, they had to achieve the minimum in that state before they could do that. And I don't think that that's currently going on right now.
In our state.
Yeah. Right? There is no test.
Not a pro board.
So you could say this right now, at that class, there is a test, right?
Mhm.
But I think one of the things we have to look to in the future is, what is the test? And if the state has a testing process, why wouldn't it be the state test?
But just to be clear on OCC's pro board, we're not a standalone pro board, we're a member of RAFT.
Right.
And it's RAFT's affiliation with pro board,
That gets
and
them.
we have submitted our program through RAFT for that pro board accreditation. So it's really no different than an instructor one test or, whatever. They're taking, the two tests, so
I don't disagree that you're.
I just wanna make sure that
No,
people
I-
understand, like, we don't have
No.
some errant standalone
No,
pro
standalone.
board.
Not at all.
Yeah,
thing. It's
program,
sort of-
right, yeah.
Hey, it's being done the right way,
Yeah.
I'm saying they take the state test, and then they take the pro board test.
Right.
And I wanna make it very clear for the folks that are listening in, is everybody gonna have to take the pro board test? And the answer is no.
That's something
We've gotta be very clear about that out there,
Right.
because that's the other part that I don't wanna hear out there is, well, now everybody's gonna have to be pro board, and to have a pro board certificate, you pay for it.
Our foundation.
We're
really-
tasked as the state, as the authority having jurisdiction for fire training, we're tasked to provide a test, and we provided it at no cost.
Our foundation for it was to provide a service to our students who may want to move out of state.
Move out of state, right.
That it was, if they choose to leave, unfortunately, when we're trying to get people into the fire service here. But it wasn't to some type of end run around, it was to
No, not at
give
all.
the
No,
students value
I wanna
added.
make this very clear. RAFT is doing fantastic things. What is being done through having, if your son or daughter's going to that program, or you yourself go and you said, hey, I might move out of state, I might wanna have that pro board, there's the mechanism to do that.
Okay, but they're not taking, some of those classes are not taking the state test, they're taking the pro board test.
There is no state.
There is no
test.
state test.
But there will be.
There will be.
And the law speaks to, there will be a certification exam. Right? You all, I mean,
Yeah.
that was very clear.
Yes, it was.
There will be
Yeah.
classifications, and it will minimally meet, that's just like saying, the NFPA
But
says.
the JPRs on the state test and the JPRs on the pro board are exactly the same, they should be interchangeable, I would think it'd be other than the questions, it'd be the same test, right?
Well, our tests, we change up the questions.
They come on the same
periodically.
test bank, right?
Yeah. Well, are they coming on the same test bank?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would, I don't know.
Other than saying they actually come out of the same test bank, I have no idea whether they're balanced, blueprinted, and all that other stuff. Whether there's been a difficulty or discrimination done on the exam, I have no idea, other than, I do know that it's the same test bank. But, so now it depends on which curriculum we're talking about, because some of them actually have pretty shallow
Well,
test banks.
by the
honestly.
time we roll out when the rules go into effect, we'll be in the new standard for
Yeah.
fire officer.
Right.
So it will be a new book, the test will be to the new standard.
Not to get too granular, but for the fire officer series, is there at least an indication? The dual curriculums from an instructor side I'm not a fan of. Is there a thought like, we're gonna go with IFSTA, we're gonna go with Jones and Bartlett? Has there been any discussion on that?
That was another thing that we asked the AG's office, the Bureau of Fire Services gets to pick the curriculum. Now, we do validate our curriculum through a curriculum community, or committee, which I think is wise.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, especially as we did this test for the firefighter 1 and 2.
Oh, that's a
To the
nightmare.
new standard.
Yeah.
It was hard. And, if you are on an organization that had people who represented you at the curriculum committee, you should be thanking them for the amount of hours that they put into it. In all seriousness, going through, there is a very distinct difference between, I get it, they both meet 1001.
Yeah.
But there is a very distinct difference between those two. So we had to come up with a 200 question test, 150 for fire questions 1 and 2 and hazmat questions. And you had to find them in the same book.
Okay.
For something that there's an NFPA standard that says you will have that, one calls it one thing and one calls it another thing. So you can't, so if you're looking at those test banks, you're going, those questions, you can't even use that question because somebody went through that textbook, that word doesn't mean anything to them. And somebody who went through this textbook, that's the only word they know. So it made it hard, very hard for us to come up with an exam.
So is there a plan not to do that for fire officer, to say, hey, we're gonna go with one?
My
I personally could care less which
intention
one.
would be one.
Okay.
And I think, because I know the amount of hours, and start thinking about this, there's going to be a instructor 1 exam, an instructor 2 exam, an instructor 3 exam, a fire officer 1, 2, 3, 4 exam. There's gonna be a lot of exams out there, and those exams have to be, they have to be validated, right? They have to be created. But more importantly, we change out 25% of our questions every year. So the upkeep of just trying to do that,
Which if you pick one curriculum, you don't have to do that because
no,
they're.
we would still.
they're-
The
they-
25%.
Yeah, they would, you would,
the
they have a test bank
25%.
that's already, they have a test bank, IFSTA has a test bank that's already created, that's already been checked. So you don't have to recreate that part, you just gotta rotate the questions out. Correct?
But you also have to, if you're down to one book, there are questions that may not be as clear in the textbook, and even though it's a valid question, even though it meets all of the things, so you have to go through that
Are those
process.
tests gonna be online or those?
The tests will be available online and they will be proctored. Even an online test will be proctored
By the state?
by the state, by a training
So
coordinator.
all of those tests are not gonna have state proctors?
They all have, yes, for the ones we have.
For option 1, 2,
yes.
and 3, that'll.
Yes. If you're a training coordinator, and we had a conference call last week with our training coordinators, when these rules go into effect, they're gonna be busy. And you're also gonna have stuff where you're gonna see maybe a firefighter 1 and 2 test given at your, wherever you have it at. I'll say at a school, and then in the afternoon, we'll probably have the training coordinator stick around and say, all right, anybody need to come in here and retest, and they could be retested on a host of things. Because the reality is that people could fail the test and they'll have to pass the test. Yes.
Getting to the online testing qualifies an institution to be able to offer the online examination.
It comes down to the county,
Okay.
and it has to be on, when our training coordinator comes in, we actually go through each one of the computers, that's why they're there early, they clear out all the browsers. When we're done with the test, they clear out all the browsers. So in the process, it's not bring your own device,
Right.
and it is done in a room with, a proctor in the room while you're doing it.
Right.
It also is, when you walk out of that room, we don't allow any phones or watches or any other devices in the test with you. When you walk out to your car, you know what your score is.
So if you have a department that purchases 25 laptops for use of testing only, why could that department run the exam?
You could purchase the 25 laptops, you'd have to provide the location, but you wouldn't run the exam.
Correct.
The state of Michigan will run the exam.
Correct. So that is able to be done. You don't have to go find a school.
Yeah, if you have the budget to buy 25, you probably make a lot of your neighbors happy. But I also will share this, the Bureau of Fire Services is not going out and buying 25 computers to give every training coordinator so they can roll into a place and set up a test. Number one, the state of Michigan won't allow us to own those devices and take them out and hook into other people's networks and stuff. So one of the things that we're doing when we're aligning with a testing site, it needs to come with an IT person. And then also realize that in your county allocation, remember the counties get to decide what they do. There is the amount, we've had people say, well, in order to have it at the whatever high school, the school says they want $200 or something to cover the IT person. There are ways that you can use your allocation, and we have a code where you can do that. I will say this though, we're not gonna pay $20K to the IT person for that to put on a test. It's within reason, but there again, those are your dollars that you decide on how you want it. But I also would say that, I've had folks that have shared at some of these meetings of, why don't you just go out and buy a bunch of computers? Because what happens to 25 computers when the software is out of date, and what happens, and And the last thing you want is on a day of the test, all these computers are rebooting, right? And stuff like that. And we have run into some of that, so that's one of the things that when we go, and this is the other thing, we run into places where we got there and the internet didn't work like they said it was going to, then we have the 15-minute rule. If we can't have that test up and running 15 minutes after the scheduled time, we will pass paper. We owe it to that student who prepped for that test and not to have them have to, figure out what's going on while Bubba the IT guy is, trying to fix stuff. So we bring paper to every test. We also bring paper for the readers. And I've had folks that said, I don't wanna take it online, I wanna take it by test, and we will afford them that opportunity. Here's the thing with the test though, it's gotta come back to Lansing, it's gotta be scanned in. So they're not gonna walk out to their car and know their score. And this is something that we need to look at, and I know I've got instructors in the room too. You need to prepare your students for when they go out to their car. Well, in all seriousness, you should almost have somebody out in the parking lot that's there to support them. Because what are they hoping when they walk out there and they look at that phone? And we've had this happen where students have gotten mad, okay? They cannot come back into the testing center and they cannot engage the training coordinator. We're not there to be the counselor, we're there to run a test, okay? With that being said, I think there should be somebody there to kind of be that counselor role, okay? But we've had students that didn't come back the next day when they should have. Does that make sense? The practical test, Friday night they took the test, they failed it. They left out of there thinking that, I failed it, I'm out. They're not out, they can do the practical test tomorrow. They just have to retest the written exam. So one of the things that we really want to get that message out to folks is have that conversation with the student. If you do not pass this test, I probably wouldn't do it we're not gonna do it the morning of the test. Is everybody good on that? But you if you're the course manager, you should be preparing them for that. Hey, listen, we've had people go to an instructor one class and fail the test and drive away. Well, that stinks, because if you would have stayed through Sunday and did your practical and you passed your practical, what do you gotta do? Retake the written exam. So I think we owe it to, as instructors, we owe it to folks to, hey, if there's a chance, this could happen, right? If this does happen, please see me, do not leave, or even having somebody out. And I'll tell you what, there have been some course managers that have done just that. They told me, I was out in the parking lot, or I had somebody out there, and we grabbed that kid, or adult, or whoever, and say, come here, let's talk about, these are your options. It's not over, you still can be a firefighter. Because that's the other thing, we don't want people walking away because they maybe scored a 69 on a test. We need people in our rosters, right? So one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is the same thing when somebody fails a test, as a course manager, even on a paper copy, please, reach out to those students and say, you've got options. What else on the rules?
Going back to the existing company officer,
Yep.
if they missed one of the co-requisites for the company officer 1 or 2,
Yep.
but finished all their 4 for fire officer 3, have time till the rules come in to get that co-requisite?
Yes, but once the new rules,
Before the new rules.
Yeah, let's be very clear on that though, especially if somebody's listening in. Those leadership classes and the others, those fire officer 3 classes, they have to be done, they have to be done as of Monday.
So I think what he's trying to say is, taken out of sequence,
Yes.
you have
A lot of
1, 2,
people,
3,
we got a lot of people that took company officer class and
Right.
now are trying to chase down the codex.
Right.
So yes, but here's the deal, when the new rules kick in, so is the rules being delayed a little bit, is that maybe a grace period to help a few people? But I've got folks that are reaching out saying, we wanna run the whole series again. You could do that, but let's say those rules were done by March.
It'd be tough to do.
It says in the draft when the rules take effect, so. And we've gotta move on as a fire service, don't you think? I mean, I think that's what I hear from a lot of folks is, a lot of folks would just assume, say, hey, now, can we start the new curriculum? I'm just not there. The old rules are in effect.
Kevin, what about the instructors that came from the EMS side and circumvented instructor 1?
I'm not certain that would be the best word, but
The ICs?
Are you bringing back train the trainer for that, or do they just have to sit through it?
The new rules say it says you have to take what you're going to teach.
Now, if you're an instructor too.
The council 2 years ago, actually longer than that ago, before I was the fire marshal, voted that EMS, you can still come that route, but you can't teach the instructor 1 or instructor 2 unless you take it.
They used to have the train the trainer.
But
they're
you
not
have to,
bringing that back.
you have to have taken the class.
So you have to take the class.
That's in
and
effect now.
Do train the trainer?
Yes.
Yes,
The give you an idea, the trainer is about 3 hours.
okay.
So you take the class, you stand up there and you present. And if you really think about it, for those of us that were certified instructors in the room, I didn't have to upgrade. I chose to be an instructor 1. I went and took the 40-hour class, and at the end, when I passed the written and the practical, then because I was certified, I didn't have to do the mentoring time, okay? But now I've taken that class, okay, even though I was a certified instructor. And I get, we can get into, the EMS is so much more, I recognize that.
Yeah.
But I'll also say that one of the things that we've heard, and that's kind of how it got to that, was there were folks that had come a different route and then went to teach that class and they never seen the curriculum, they never used the curriculum. And everybody can say, well, you're an instructor, you should be able to teach anything. I think we've all sat in that class, haven't we? I mean, let's be honest. We've sat in a class where there are folks, even this, hey, if you've taken it, you can teach it. There's some things that some people shouldn't be teaching. And we need to recognize it as instructors. So, so can you still come from the EMS? Absolutely. I'm still signing them off. We'll do it in the future. But in order to teach those classes, you will have had to have taken those classes.
So when if you come from the EMS side and you go through, you get your instructor 1, and you go through and you get your instructor 2.
Yep.
Instructor 2s do not have to sit through every class they teach, correct?
No, instructor 2s can develop their own curriculum and teach classes.
But in order to teach other classes that are already set, they have to sit through that or train the trainer.
Well, if you think about it, most people who came, if you would say the fire route, they were an instructor 1, they can teach anything they taught, right, or taken, I should say.
Taken.
And then they go to instructor 2, and so when they take instructor 2, that's the requirement to be able to go back and teach instructor 1. So in theory, they've taken all those classes all the way through.
So instructor 2s cannot teach any other curriculum, like grab a curriculum from somewhere and.
Sure they can.
Yeah, they can,
Yep.
okay.
They just
They
can't
don't
teach
have to sit
instructor
through.
1 unless they've
they
taken
sit.
instructor 1.
And they're, yes.
And are an instructor 2.
Yes.
I'm in that spot right now.
And
I was
trainer.
I was a certified instructor, instructor 1 came through.
Yes, and-
I threw my IC in, I took instructor 2, so I am instructor 2. The only class I cannot teach is an instructor 1 unless I wanna sit through
Because
it,
you didn't take it.
because I didn't take it.
But down the road, you'll be able to teach an instructor 2 class.
Yes, I can teach instructor 2 just like.
Once you take instructor 2.
In my spare time, chief. Right,
And
put that on my outlook right
I'm
now.
gonna share this with you. I got my instructor 2 by, some would say, the old route. It was 3 letters and turn in 100 and some hours of instruction. Prove you taught this many hours, okay? That was the original way. When I'm done being the fire marshal, if I wanna teach instructor 2 class, I am an instructor 2. I will have to take that class if I'm going to teach that class. And there are other people that are on the council that are instructor 2s who have not taken instructor 2. So, one of the things that you have to look at it is that whether you agree or disagree what's best for the fire service, that's different people's opinion, right? But one of the things is that we're not speaking out both sides of our mouth either. We're saying that if we wanna teach instructor 2, we have to take it, because we've never taken it.
Is there gonna be a vetting process, or was it talked about for instructors that are doing what you mentioned earlier, teaching something that you've never had any idea about?
If you've taken the class, the idea is that you have taken it, and under a fire instructor 1, you can now teach that class.
Right.
Most of it, believe it or not, fixes itself the first time.
They don't get
Because-
asked to teach again.
Because they won't get asked, either that or it'll be a terrible experience and
Oh, yeah.
they'll say, I don't wanna do that. So it does have a way to fit. Unfortunately though, is you can get in some areas and that's where, I'll also say this, you remember when I said making a false statement, like signing a roster when you didn't teach the class? A lot of that comes out of when you run into an instructor who doesn't know the material. Because if you knew the material, you'd have plenty to do during that time period. But because they don't know the material, they can only read the slides for so long. And if they're reading them really fast, now all of a sudden they're way ahead, and now what do I do? And then they can't really go back and do a lot of the activity stuff because they don't have the knowledge to really dive into that. And so some of those, and those are a lot of the ones, those are the ones I get complaints on. I'll share this with you. The complaints that I get, the majority of them, is from somebody who went to a class and was expecting this, and they got this. Those are the people that complain. I took 2 days off from my family to drive to wherever, and I thought when I was done, I would have this knowledge level, and I don't even think I got to here. Those are the people who call. Those are the people who go back to their chief. You also have to watch, and that's one of the reasons why we've been really big on the hour stuff. We've had folks that have gone back to their department that were backfilled for the day, and the battalion chief or the captain says, "What are you doing back?" "I'm back." "How can you be back?" "Well, we're out of class." "You're out of class already?" "Well, do I have to get somebody to come in for you tomorrow morning to go to class?" "No, we don't have class tomorrow, we're done." Well, guess what everybody else on that department has done up to this point? They know that it's in the safety officers a 16-hour class. See where I'm going with that? And they're now scratching their head going, how did this person do it in 6 hours? Those are the complaints. That makes the fire marshal's phone ring. And then you start looking into this, and so I'll say we've come a long way in the last year and a half, and a lot of it's been through memos and guidance of, we're not going to tolerate that. And by the way, even today, when you sign a roster, it says, I attest that I taught the objectives. Well, I've got students who are saying that they have instructors out there who go, "Oh, you already know that, we aren't gonna cover that." And that's the other thing the student says, if I already knew it, I wouldn't have came here. Yet you have instructors who are taken for granted just because somebody works someplace or they're from some area that they already know that. So please, for the instructors out there, don't cut corners. I don't like when my phone rings, because, the reality is that then it forces us to have to do investigations and different things, and we got plenty of other stuff that we need to be working on. Do a great job with the class. Teach stuff that you're comfortable with and you're knowledgeable enough. Stay in your swim lane. I think that would be some good advice for instructors that are out there.
Can I tell you, thank you for killing the leadership classes?
Thank you. How's that?
Second that. They needed to be updated so bad.
And that's why the NFA pulled them down. It truly is. They pulled them down. They said, we let people finish up, and that stuff really wasn't supported. But you know what? I think we owed it to the people who already were. But it was very clear, and it was out there too, is if you needed that leadership 3 class, you better have found it in the last couple of months. And there was classes running. So, but yes, I would agree. And for those of you that have taken any of the ones that sort of replace it, because I don't want to say they're a true replacement, the slides are less than 100 for the whole 2-day process, and it's back and forth, you facilitating. And a lot of folks have said to me, they go, I don't like that style, because they don't want to, be that facilitator, but that's where a lot of the stuff is going, and that's coming right out of the NFA. So. Certified fire instructor, if you're currently one, you're the old certified, you teach at the academy, pretty much, right? Or at the firefighter 1 and 2 class. I always use the word academy, I gotta keep telling me, and you teach at the firefighter 1 and 2 class, you're good for as long as you wanna be a certified instructor. Is everybody good on that? However, if you're probationary associate certified, you have less than 2 years now to be done and be a associate certified. That sunsets and that goes away. Everybody good on that? So I signed off on some people just the other day that, I look at them and go, hey, associate, and I said to Dan and TJ, they know that they have to be a certified associate by this day, otherwise that goes away too, okay?
Is the rule for taking instructor one and waiving the hours still gonna be in effect? So, you're one of those, like, I'm one of those old guys that I only teach at the academy.
Right.
And I wanna take the instructor one, do I still have to do the mentoring
No,
part?
you're certified.
So that,
Yeah, you're certified. You take instructor one, you're certified now.
I just gotta take the class and the test.
You take the class, you do not have to do the mentoring because you're a certified coming back through. Yes. So that is
So
a,
that's gonna remain into effect?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not, because here's the thing also, is a lot of, like yourself, you've been teaching here and there, so we want people to continue to do it. But I'll also say this, moving forward, once the new rules are in effect, there's fire instructor one, there's fire instructor two, and then there's gonna be fire instructor three. There's not gonna be any certified associates.
Right.
None of that stuff, at least we won't be issuing it. It will still be in the system,
So the old guard, when they're going, they're gone.
when they're done, they're done. Yep.
What is the plan for the rollout, chief, for instructor three?
Well, if you look at probably who's been teaching instructor, or, excuse me, becoming officer one and two, because that's what we call it, right? And fire officer three under the old system, it's pretty much been the same people, okay? So that's our pool that most likely we go to and we say, hey, are you interested in doing this? You're gonna have to come to an in-service, we're gonna explain to you how it works, we're gonna explain the task book, we're gonna explain that you gotta grade papers, we're gonna explain that you have to take in the projects. And that's the other thing too, is that it isn't you just turn in a letter that the chief would never accept. You turn in a letter that you'd be willing to take to your city manager and say, this is my work. Okay, does that make sense? So for some folks who write letters all the time, Chief Kenny, how many letters have you wrote this week?
You mean today?
Right, so,
Can only
to
count one
you,
thing.
if you were gonna go, if he was gonna go back through and say, hey, I wanna go back through this and do this, he'd write a letter, it'd be on the letterhead, and he would hand it in. For somebody who was brand new, maybe in the Ann Arbor Fire Department, maybe they got 5 years on, they think they wanna be a company officer, who probably hasn't wrote a letter since maybe they took a college class, right? We're probably gonna have to work with them a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, not company officer, instructor three.
Oh, instructor three?
Instructor three, yeah, not company officer.
So,
What's
they
the
have,
law?
if you read in the rules, it talks about there will be a period of time where there will be a grandfathered sort of, I hate to use the grandfather, more the equivalency, that twos can teach that until we get enough, once we get past a certain date, and then you're gonna have to be a three. There's no other way to get there. That was, you talk about council, I told you we met like
So
18
twos will be
times
teaching threes to twos that wanna be threes.
at the beginning.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean.
I know, you have to start
no other way.
somewhere, I'm just curious where.
But it's for a window of time, and also those twos that are teaching threes have to become a three,
Right.
all right? So you have this time period for you yourself to become a three, so that you can teach the twos.
But only if you take one.
Yeah, there you go. So before everybody leaves.
1, 2, 3.
Because it's in there, if you've been looking at the draft, if you're currently an instructor one, you can teach anything you've taken, right? And if you're currently an instructor two, we can say you can develop your own curriculum, you can teach anything, right? That's what the rules say, okay?
What's the 3 do for me?
There is still a three right now. It's not even addressed in our current rules. When we go to the new, remember where it said the certified associates going away? A fire instructor one, once we get into the new date, will only be able to teach at the fire academy or the firefighter 1 and 2 class, and anything they've taken to train the trainer for. Once the new rules are adopted, a fire instructor 2 can teach anything they taught. And a fire instructor 3 can teach, or not anything they taught, anything they've taken.
So what are you gonna do with the guys that have been instructor ones for 5 years and have been teaching all kinds of classes?
They can do what they're doing.
They can
They can do what they're doing.
continue, so it'll be a grandfather thing again, is what you're
Yes.
saying, okay.
There's a whole bunch, if you go back in there and look at the rules, I will say this, that the council has fought hard to make sure that the paper you have will be good for as long as you wanna be doing this. Okay?
So does that mean that,
I want, cause you're gonna read that, and you're gonna go, hey, wait a minute, an instructor one can only teach firefighter 1 and 2 in hazmat, and anything they've taken to train the trainer. And currently, an instructor one can teach anything they've taken.
so where?
It all hops up kind of a level.
So over a period of time, it'll clear itself out.
Where do Q courses fit into that?
Q courses are your own domain.
Okay. You don't have to be instructor one or two.
You're the subject matter expert on your Q course, and they were, because here's the thing, I can't have John Norman from FD&Y come in and go, hey, chief, I can't believe you teach in Michigan, Michigan produced a fire instructor one
Right.
that's equivalent to ours, right? I'm just saying that, so that's one thing with Q courses, you know, you didn't ask Mr. Fields last weekend, did you, chief, on whether or not what level of instructor he was in Washington? I
I
probably
would have given a very interesting answer.
Yeah, right, he would have, for sure. And so, you know, the Q courses are standalone, we're talking about curriculum. Here's something that, you know, I shared with you early on, that anybody could teach at your own department, because it's the chief's department, he gets to set he's already have jurisdiction. If you really think about this, by the time we're into this thing, maybe 5-7 years, pretty much anybody who's in the fire officer series will have the ability to teach. Now, whether they go out on this track to be an active instructor, or they kind of park it, but at the end of the day, they still had to get up for 15 minutes and show competency, look people in the eye, and they had to not sound like an auctioneer, right? And they had to be able to give an intro, and they had to be able to deliver the body, they had to be knowledgeable, they had to be able to use props, they had to be able to drink water and talk at the same time, right? I mean, those are things that I think it's going to, in a lot of ways, make the fire service better.
We can only hope.
What's that?
We can only hope.
That's what the intention was, right?
That was.
Don't wanna talk about chiefs? So we worked down through the, we worked our way down through the document, and there was if you're in a community that's less than 9,999 people that you serve, once the new rules go into effect, within 2 years of you being appointed the chief, you have to be a fire officer 1. Less than 9,999, you have to be a fire officer 1. If you're in a community with more than 10,000 people, you'll have to be a fire officer 2 within 3 years of getting the job. And the reason that they gave the 3 years is, by the time they get their instructor 1, and they get a fire officer 1, and they get a fire officer 2. So council looked at that and they said, hey, 24 months is probably realistic for instructor 1 and fire officer 1. Okay? What about the chiefs that are currently the chiefs? You are the chiefs. As long as you.
So what, and I'm assuming, and I'm just.
We're not going back and saying, hey, chief, how many people are in Fenton City? You gotta go be a fire officer 1. If you're a chief right now, you're a chief. Now, can your authority having jurisdiction say you need a master's degree in psychology? Sure they can.
So just for because for me, under that policy, I'm a chief, Now, if Adam retires and I want his job, and I only have fire officer 1, or I have the old fire officer 3, is that still good? My paper's still good, and it travels with me?
Good. You got 1, 2, and 3.
Travels with me throughout my career.
What's that?
Travels with me throughout my career, no matter what department I work in.
The paper you have, you own.
Okay.
What happens if the fire chief doesn't get the certifications after 2 or 3 years?
It's stated in the rules and
You won't be certified, and then that's up to
you
me.
won't be certified, and then it would be probably my issue if they were to come in and say, why aren't you certified, chief?
What about the chiefs who are chiefs because they're good on continuing education credits?
You mean that aren't going to continue that?
No, you're saying if you're a chief now and you're the chief.
Yes, you have to continue that.
Okay, so you're gonna have to do.
Same thing, we have firefighters out there pre-1988 that
They're
never went to
old
firefighter
66.
class, right? They have to, everybody does continue that, everybody, including the chiefs. So, you know, I've been to places where they'll say, I can't remember the last time the chief participated in training with us. It's 12 hours of training, and if you're a chief, then it's 12 hours of chief training based over a 3-year cycle.
8 hours
So
of
you go to
hazmat.
one of the chiefs conferences, boom, you're renewed.
8 hours of hazmat's in there. You still gotta have 8 hours of hazmat a year too.
That's coming back on that commensurate with the duties you're expected to perform.
That's in part 74.
Right, but you won't see that in the rules.
Not in our rules, because it's already somewhere else.
Everybody good? Anything else that's bothering them? Wanna know what? Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is, and I would ask, go back and talk to people in all seriousness. There's a lot of folks, like I said, probably the biggest things I wanna take away is, no, you don't have to be a certified instructor to teach within your own department for your own department's training. No, you don't have to turn in stuff 6 weeks in advance like you do in EMS. No, you don't have to turn in your stuff every 3 years like you do for an EMS license, okay? And the department maintains the training records. Everybody's training records aren't gonna come to the state. If you take a state class or a Q course, they're gonna be there.
And there's no fire up support, as far as the staff and command, you're still.
What's that?
The staff and command equaling fire up support, you're not decided yet.
We haven't got to that part yet.
And so.
Cause that would be in reciprocity.
Right,
and
and
also-
let's say these rules don't get adopted till April, but fire officer, this next series starts in February. Is that being?
Well,
considered?
the fire officer won't start until the rules are up there.
Right, but I'm
Oh,
sorry.
staff and
the staff
command.
and command starts in February, so that's, are they in the door, or are they still walking through the door?
So what if the council needs to,
I gotta believe, and this is just my personal feeling, the staff and command and the EFO are gonna be equivalent of something greater than fire officer 1 or 2. It's gotta be. I mean, you look at the curriculum.
well, let me ask you this too, and
Why wouldn't you?
I wanna ask somebody this question. Do you probably put that EFO certificate on your wall?
Yes, I do.
Is it currently in your smoke training roster, or your training record?
I don't think so.
No, it isn't.
No.
So that isn't anything that anybody can take away from you. And you were issued a certificate. You know, we've got a lot of folks out there that are taking training in other places and they don't have a certificate. And now they're trying to, hey, I wanna make it count towards this, or I wanna make it count towards that. You have a certificate. There's only so many people out there in the fire world that have an EFO certificate. Just like there's only so many that have that staff and command certificate. And I get where a lot of you are saying, well, I want that to be foreign, I want that to go into here, I want that to go into here. But do you know how many other things are out there? So if I go to the Texas A&M Leadership School for a month, is that worth this? I mean, at a certain point, you have stuff that's showing up in our office and we're going, what is that equivalent to? I've had people that have told me that, hey, all those classes I take at FDIC all would line up to certain NFPA requirements. Are you gonna give me credit for?
Yeah, I would, and this is, I mean, you go to a college and you want credit for life credit, you have to write something and provide this was I mean, so somewhere along the way, somebody would have to say staff and command meets these JPRs for Officer 4, and then that would, to me, that would make sense to give the reciprocity. If the
So
JPRs
let me
don't
ask you this though, what if it doesn't meet 2 of the JPRs?
they'd have to do the JPRs.
Well, but they took the class 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
See, this is the
That's that
type of stuff that I
reciprocity
get it,
and all
it
that,
seems
yeah.
pretty straightforward, and you say, this is this. At the end of the day, you have a nice certificate that's hanging on the wall that says you completed staff and command school, you know what you did. I'm just saying that this equivalency thing, at the end of the day, how it all
I get it.
filters in.
You know, but
confusing
that's
from
just
state to
department
state.
dependent too. I mean, if you got a contract that says you gotta have fire officer 4, you gotta take fire officer 4. Right, but if you have, if they say they want the chief to have staff and command, or the battalion chiefs to have staff and command, that's up to the department. There's no rule that says you gotta have that.
And there is no fire officer 4, so I don't know where people have been
Right.
getting fire officer 4. There's nothing in the state of Michigan, right?
I don't know, if you're gonna have a fire officer 4, sir?
So, you know, that's what I'm saying is we're gonna grow into where we're at. So, you know, the other thing is you get stuff that comes from other states that doesn't say that. Well, is that really that? And you can spend a lot of time chasing down certificates and letters and.
You need to look no further than the whole tech rescue debacle as to who certifies what in that area.
Yeah.
Depends on who you talk to.
That depends on who you're trying to become a member of.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it depends on who you talk to. Yeah.
those aren't addressed in the law, so that,
What's that?
those aren't addressed in the law.
Well, it says technical rescue responder, but it doesn't
Respond.
specifically go down.
Right.
Does the, and I know it doesn't say that, does the staff and command certificate say fire officer four?
No.
And that's, does the.
Does the FO
Does
say
the, and they don't, right? And that's what I'm saying is, when it's coming in from another state, if Florida has fire officer four and they present it as fire officer four, so.
Oh, because that term has a definition and a script in the NFPA standard.
I wanna be careful though, that when we talk about it, you could be in another state and you could go to the Iowa Industrial College or whatever and get one that says you're an NFPA fire instructor one. You also could find out that the state of Iowa has a one, and they're the authority having jurisdiction, cause it speaks to that. And you'd say, well, you gotta take it from the Iowa Industrial School, okay? The body that says you're certified in Iowa is the state of Iowa. It's not Iowa. So that's one of the things that you run into going from state to state.
Right.
So you have to be careful on some of that. And I'm learning more about this than I ever thought I would know about it. But when you go to different places,
Right.
it's pretty easy to come to Michigan, I'll leave it at that. And then in fact, if you go out and you do your homework, I would dare say this is the easiest state to come to be a firefighter. It'll be the easiest place to come to be a fire officer and a fire chief. And it literally will be trading in paper, being in good standing, and signing an application, and you are going to have that from the state of Michigan. So for those folks that are out there that are watching, that are in other states and wanna come to Michigan, please do. We could use you, especially if you're a paramedic, right?
That's a whole nother story, dude.
Chief, how did I do? Good plug?
Good.
The joke about it, it is.
Yeah.
There's places that are struggling, right, to find medics and firefighters. And I think part of this is, but right now, the other takeaway is, if somebody has firefighter 1 and 2, or firefighter 1, depending on your department, right? That's the other thing. In Michigan, if you're on a volunteer or a combination fire department, you only have to be firefighter 1 with hazmat ops. And I know some people say, well, in our county, we do this. You know what? I've had people share with me that the reason I can't come on the fire department is because my spouse won't agree to 400 hours of training. But they might agree to 200 hours of training.
One other question, and I don't remember where we left it, to be honest with you, because I got, is these departments that are hiring a guy, working him 364 days, laying him off for 15 days, hiring him back, and never completing a fire 1 and 2, or fire 1 and hazmat ops. Are the rules addressing that?
Yeah, it says within 2 years. And once you're on our roster, if my issue was to ask, hey, when did Ples show up on the roster? He showed up on this day. So I get it, you can play that game of end dating, but,
Right.
you know.
So that should bring an end to that.
Should.
Okay. Because I know that was a concern we had, is, you know,
It is.
and then that process of in and out.
Everybody feeling pretty good about, they feel educated on what's going on? I mean, we continue to plug away on it. It's hard to get 9 people together in a room, I'll share that. You all know that, you're all busy people too. But, we are doing our best to get it done. We're excited, my staff's excited to kind of get the rules put in, so they're in the process, and then we're gonna get focused on curriculum. And, we're also bringing 2 new staff members on at the Bureau. We'll be bringing on a department tech, who, if you remember Bree Hooker, that position, we're gonna have that funded. And then we're also bringing on a certification specialist. And that person will basically run the certification process. So, pretty exciting time to bring 2 additional people on, which we're gonna have to with all the stuff we're gonna be issuing, you know, reciprocity and equivalencies, and then giving all these tests and training coordinators. So, it's needed. Thank you to the council for making that happen. And I can share with you, this year, we spent $2.3 million. I can't say that we've done that in my 2 previous years, so thanks for all the hard work that you all do.
Hopefully that funding stream doesn't come to an end.
Well, there's a lot of money, yeah, I mean, it could, right, if
Yeah.
fireworks went away, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of money in a fund. There's enough that if that did happen, there's enough probably to fund training in the state for about 3 years at the current level before we would be out of money. Which is kind of a good thing to know that it's there, right? Everybody's doing their fire reports, right? Cool. That's not true, but I'm glad you all. Actually, we sent a letter to supervisors, mayors, and city managers 2 weeks ago, and basically said your fire department's not doing this, which caused the phone to ring a lot for Rhonda. But, and a lot of people are coming on board and they're starting to do the reporting, but in order to receive the money, you gotta have 12 consecutive months, which means once you start reporting, what do you gotta continue to do? It clearly says 12 consecutive months, so we're working through that. We were at 84% at the end of August, which is the highest. I don't think anybody's had it higher than that. Yeah, it's been in the 70s historically, so and I think it'll push it, we'll be over 90%, I think, when we run the report at the end of the week.
I'll have you know, Mr. Deerfield is mass emailing against our Oakland County departments on a quarterly basis.
MDHHS is almost at 100%, they're the 99.4% or something, the last I read. Which is
They have a little
unbelievable.
more, they have a bigger hammer though.
Yeah, they do. That's kind of unbelievable.
No, I think that was the intention too, getting people to report, so. See you on the 22nd if you wanna see the rules in motion in the morning at Lansing Community College. Meeting follows in the afternoon, and I know there's a lot of instructors in here, would love to see you up for the snowshoeing and instructors conference in December.